It's the Week 16 Waiver Wire. If you're still watching, you're either my mom and dad, hi, or you made it to the playoffs. And on that note, congratulations. Let's get it started. Do you have questions at quarterback? Don't worry, I got you. Baker Mayfield. Baker balled out last week against Green Bay. 381 yards and 4 touchdowns. Literally a perfect passer rating. First perfect passer rating of any opponent in Lambeau Field. Congratulations, Baker. Going up against Jacksonville, I think you can fire him up. Next, I think you can stay on the flames with Joe Flacco. Back-to-back games with 20 or more fantasy points. I don't think he has a huge upside. But going up against Houston, if CJ Stroud plays, it could be a nice back-and-forth affair. I think Joe Flacco is a startable quarterback. Here's where we get a little more shaky. Jake Browning. And just to be clear, Flacco is kind of shaky too. Jake Browning has had 3 back-to-back games with 20 or more fantasy points, but he doesn't have Jamar Chase anymore. Yes, I love T. Higgins, but Jamar Chase down to Tyler Boyd is a huge downgrade. I think that downgrades Jake, but I still think he's playable. Going up against Pittsburgh, who, heck, Gardner Minshew just had a heck of a game against Pittsburgh. I think that Browning should be okay. Divisional matchup should be interesting. And lastly, Nick Mullins. Nick was pretty solid against Cincinnati. 300 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did throw 2 picks, but they got him 19 fantasy points. If you're desperate, I think you can go with Nick Mullins, but hopefully you have something better than these options. Honestly, Baker's the only one that I really think is a solid play, and I'm really not excited about any of them. Are you weak at wide receiver? Don't worry, I got you. Noah Brown! I told you to pick him up last week, but to be honest with you, I was not super confident, but he was the last man standing. Well, this week I'm slightly more confident. He had 11 targets last week, 8 and 80. And a touchdown. Goes up against Cleveland. It's a much harder matchup, but I think he's playable. Regardless of if Nico Collins plays or not, I actually think that Nico Collins could pull defenders away from Noah Brown, so I think he's a solid play. Next up, Curtis Samuel, and I've been hesitant to start this man, but he is getting involved. 9 targets, ended up with 2 touchdowns. My man had 21 fantasy points in PPR. Going up against the New York Jets. The Jets are great, but Sauce Gardner's not going to be on Curtis Samuel. He's going to be on Terry McLaurin. I think Curtis Samuel could be a solid spot start. Next up, Tyler Boyd. With Jamar Chase going down, Tyler Boyd is going to be the next man up. I think he gets more involved. Going up against Pittsburgh, who doesn't really scare you, especially since they're a little more banged up right now. I think if you're desperate, you could probably start Tyler Boyd. The rest of these are kind of flyers. Raheem Shaheed, I was forced to start him last week. Luckily, I made it through. If Chris Olave misses again, I still think that you could play Rashid Shaheed. Could have a blow-up game. He could go for 150 and a touchdown, but he could also go for 3 for 36. It's boom or bust, but I do think he has boom potential. Demarcus Robinson's getting involved in creative ways, running and receiving, plus he got a touchdown in 3 straight games. In desperation, you could start Demario Douglas, Wan'Dale Robinson, or Joshua Palmer if Keenan Allen doesn't play. Are you having a rough time at running back? Don't worry, I got you. Ty Chandler absolutely balled out last week. Over 150 yards from scrimmage and a touchdown, getting involved in the passing and the rushing game. If he's still out there, scoop him up. I know he helped me in some leagues. My number 1 running back option off the waiver wire. The head coach came out and said, even if Alexander Madison is back, Ty Chandler has earned his spot. I think he gets some work this week. Next up, Zamir White is a solid grab, assuming Josh Jacobs doesn't play. If Josh Jacobs misses, I think Zamir White is a great grab. If not, obviously you don't start him. I know that Isaiah Pacheco is back, but I think Jerick McKinnon is a solid hold in case something does happen to Pacheco, and for whatever reason he's not able to go. This team likes McKinnon in the red zone. Chase Brown's getting involved, and he's explosive. He could always bust off a big play. With Keaton Mitchell going down, Justice Hill could get involved. I'm really not excited about it. To be frank, I'm really not excited about any of these other than Ty Chandler and Zamir White, assuming they're both starting. But desperate times call for desperate measures. If Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss don't play, Trey Sermon, I think, is probably the backup you want. He had 17 carries last week. Are you having a tough time at tight end? Don't worry, I got you. Isaiah Likely, back-to-back games with a touchdown and back-to-back games with 18 or more fantasy points. Let's go. San Francisco matchup isn't great, but Trey McBride did pretty well last week. I think you fire up Likely. Next up, Hunter Henry, back-to-back games with 19 or more fantasy points. He's had 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games. I think you fire up Hunter Henry. Plus, I'm pretty sure Denver's not good against tight ends. Next up, Tucker Kraft. Doing pretty well in this Green Bay offense. 2 touchdowns in the last 4 games, double-digit fantasy points in 3 of the last 4. I think he's worth the start if you're desperate. Talk about a desperation play. Darren Waller is probably on your waiver wire. If no one else is out there, he got 6 targets and went 4 for 40 for 8 fantasy points. You could probably do worse. I'm not excited about Waller, but he was a big thing coming in. Could he get more involved? Maybe. Are you desperate for a defense? Don't worry, I got you. The Denver Broncos. I know that they just got destroyed by the Detroit Lions, but they're going up against the New England Patriots, and picking defenses is about finding bad offenses. I think the New England Patriots are probably going to throw a few picks and get sacked a few times. Maybe a fumble. Next up, we play the game Find Whoever Plays the Carolina Panthers. Green Bay Packers? Yep, sounds good to me. Start the Packers over the Panthers. Panthers suck. I also think you can start the Cincinnati Bengals over the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's a divisional matchup. It should be closer, and Pittsburgh doesn't score a lot. I'm picking them assuming that Mason Rudolph plays. If Mason Rudolph doesn't play and it's Kenny Pickett, I'm a little more concerned about this one, but I still don't think it's going to be a high-scoring affair, regardless. Check to see if these defenses are out there, and before you tell me they're not out there in your league, okay, cool story, bro. They played the Dallas Cowboys last week. Someone could have dropped them. So if anybody was silly enough to drop the Buffalo Bills, the Bills play the Chargers this week. If they happen to be on your waiver wire, grab them immediately. They're probably not there because they're rostered in like 70% of leagues, but it's worth a check. Same thing with the New York Jets. If the Jets are out there because they played the Miami Dolphins, make sure you grab them. They play Washington. Washington sucks. If you made it this far, you really did make it to the second round. Congratulations. Again, it's not over yet. Job's not finished, but you did get one step closer. Well, it's time to take them down. This week isn't going to be easy. The matchup is going to get more difficult, but we're going to work the wire and make sure you get that dub. You're not just using the waiver wire for yourself this week. Check your opponent and see what they need. If their quarterback got injured, go grab the best available quarterback. Did they lose a wide receiver? Go grab the top wide receiver. Same thing with running backs, tight ends, defenses. This is the one time of year where you actually should be playing defense against your opponent. Don't get caught slipping on the waiver wire. Snag your opponent's best grabs. Block your opponents from what they need, and that'll help you get what you need. A dub, baby. Let's go. Round 2. Let's get it started.